Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us, colleagues, friends from the Internet Society. I understand we have with us folks from pretty much around the world, and I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us. We thought it might be worthwhile for Sally and myself to give you an update on where we are, at least in our thinking, on this great idea called Internet governance. In so many ways, this has been the year of Internet governance. It seems that at least since the time I joined ISOC, we have had to concentrate our energies on first defining what that means, and again reasserting the principles that we hold around how we should think about these ideas of governance. So a lot has transpired over the last year. I won't go through a timeline, but I thought it was worthwhile while we have this short period, and we really do have a short period, between the time we were in Istanbul to the time we're going off to Busan, to perhaps take a breath and reflect on where we were and where we want to go. So let me first give you a little outline, I think, of the next couple of 90 minutes. And I invite you to adjust this agenda if you think that is it's smarter to do that. I thought I would just chat with you for a little bit about my thinking, have Sally then hear from you and have a bit of a discussion around sort of the high concepts that we are pursuing. And then turn it over to Sally, who will talk about much more specifically what we will be doing and thinking about as we go to the Plenipot. Excuse me, I'm going to do some water here. Then finally, I thought I would give you an update on our planning for 2015. So with the time left, I thought we could get a little feedback from you as we put together our 2015 action plan, is what we're calling it. All right, so back to Internet governance. According to the Internet Society's recent Global Internet report, the number of Internet users worldwide, as you well know, is up to almost 3 billion people. We also know, however, that we have the rest of the world to connect. Every time we talk about Internet governance, I like to start with this notion, because our first commitment is to ensuring that everyone in the world, everywhere, is connected. As high as that commitment is the commitment that we protect and we preserve the open global connectivity of the Internet that we are all, frankly, dedicated to, the idea of the Internet, the reality of the Internet, and the promise of the Internet. Those two imperatives guide us in all of our thinking around Internet governance. As I have said in other forums, one, we need anything we do in this space has to ensure that we connect the next 4 billion people. And number two, that we, again, preserve its openness and its global connectivity. This must be the basis of all of our thinking about ideas of governance. A topic and a term, in my view, that sometimes is misused and misconstrued to be much more about some sort of overarching governing kind of structure than I believe is called for, and that I believe is actually not the way we think about governing ourselves on the Internet. So let's be clear. There is no single governance structure for the Internet, nor is there a single global platform that can serve to coordinate, organize, and govern all of the issues that are likely to arise on this network of networks that goes across boundaries, over sovereign states, and connects people to people, communities to communities. And that's because the internet is, as we know, a complex ecosystem. It is dynamic and changing, and it is ever changing. And it has resulted in a borderless marketplace where new users are coming on every day, and new ideas and new expectations are raised as to how the technology itself will evolve. In that kind of dynamic situation, in an ecosystem that has this diverse set of organizations, social, political entities, and communities, we must work together. We must collaborate. And this idea of collaboration and creation of value for the overall network is what we here at the Internet Society are dedicated to do. And what I know from your comments that I read very diligently on the lists that you believe as well. So the heart of this internet is a decentralized, distributed system that allows policies to be defined close to where they happen, the local level, the regional level, and sometimes, yes, indeed, at the global level. But we have to keep thinking about this notion that we govern ourselves in the places where we act and in the places where we are accessing using the internet. This ecosystem, this idea of governance, draws its strength from a broad range of actors who work in open, transparent, and collaborative ways. And we've termed this idea of collaborative decision-making as the multi-stakeholder model. And it's the one that we talk about everywhere around the world. That this is how we will grow the internet, and this is how we will preserve its openness. I don't mean to suggest that the internet and its users cannot or should not adapt to the challenges of the 21st century. It is not 1992 anymore. We are not just inventing this thing called the internet, but now we indeed are evolving it. And now we are growing it, and we are making it stronger and more resilient. And there are many more users and many more actors. There are many commercial actors who are innovating and investing, and governments surely have interests in how their people are protected from fraud, from crime, from things that their sovereign states feel is necessary to ensure that their people are safe. However, those ideas and those governing principles must come from the bottom up. They must be from the users themselves, and this must be across the world, both locally, regionally, and globally. So you'll see in the filing that we made this week to the Plenipotentiary that we again talk about the principles that guide us. And I would refer you to that document to remind us again about why we believe, what we believe about these governance issues, about a well-informed public, about the decentralized architecture of the internet, about this combination of global and local initiatives that we need. So what do we do then? What do we want to say about what's happened over the last year then? We've seen initiatives on both the global level with WSIS and with the IGF, on the local level with the local IGS that you all have put together. We've seen initiatives, of course, around getting the principles more understood in Net Mondial. We know that the IANA conversation around the NTIA exit from that sphere has caused us to think very deeply about the roles of the various stakeholders in government. And we know that we are now going into the ITU Plenipotentiary, in which, under its mandate, the ITU will consider what it can do to develop an enabling environment for the internet. A lot of conversations going on all at the same time. So as we go forward, as we think about what's next, as we think about strengthening the IGF, and I want to talk about that more, but I'm going to stop talking in a minute so I can let you talk. As we think about strengthening the IGF, as we think about how we want to engage at the ITU, as we think about all the other initiatives that are happening around the world, CIGI has a big conference. We know the WEF is looking at this. We know that various countries are trying to find ways to adopt and adapt the multi-stakeholder process to itself. And we know that there are grave threats to the things that we value. As we think about these things, I ask you to go back to first principles. I ask us to think about the principles we hold dear. I ask us to remember that this is about ensuring that everyone in the world has the internet and that we do not break it. So with that, I'm going to start talking for a moment and then see if you all have some thoughts, some comments, questions. I'd love to hear from you at this point before I turn it over to Sally. Thank you. Someone has to, you know, if we're going to have these discussions, by the way, and I'm thrilled to death that we're able to do this and we can use some video to do it. I hope that you'll have something to say back, and so that we can actually talk to each other. I know, because I know on the when I read you on the list that folks have thoughts, so let's figure out whether you could give it a little thought. And with that, I think I'll turn to Sally, let her talk about what's going to happen at the ITU, and then we'll go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy, and hello, everyone. It's great that we can do this this community forum just before a number of us head off to Busan for the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference. As Kathy said, we are on a continuous track of discussions and dialogue about internet governance and about a range of things on how the internet ecosystem works and how different stakeholders can interact with that ecosystem. The International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, is a part of the global internet ecosystem. And the conference this year in Busan is a treaty-level event. It's a meeting that the ITU hosts every 4 years for the member states to really think about, discuss, and debate what the ITU will do, what the budget will be for the ITU to do the things it's set out to do, and who will lead that effort in terms of the elections of senior officials at the ITU. And so the Plenipotentiary Conference in Busan will take all of these things up. It's a very complex event. It's 3 weeks long. And the governing, or the governments of the ITU will come together to figure out what the scope of the ITU's activity should be, what its strategic plan should look like, how it will be financed, and as I said, what the leadership of the ITU will be. Within that context, there are a lot of moving pieces, but there will be a piece of that discussion that focuses on really the role of the ITU in this broader internet ecosystem. And there are a lot of proposals that have been coming in, regional meetings that have been taking place since late last year as governments really formulate their thinking and work with their communities, we hope, and develop the proposals that will shape that treaty conference. For the Internet Society, we've been paying close attention to the discussions that have been happening in preparation for Busan, and many of you within the community have also been engaged at the local level in working with your governments and with your communities to think carefully about these questions and think about this bigger question of what is the role of the ITU in the broader internet ecosystem. From our perspective, as you would have seen in the information paper that we sent out over the last several days, there is a lot of work to be done to meet the aspirations and the goals that Kathy laid out in terms of connecting the unconnected and bringing this technology and the power of communications to the entire world. And the ITU has a role in that, effort. The ITU has a role in capacity building, in the enabling environment. This is work that the ITU has done for a very long time. There is an important role, of course, the ITU has at the infrastructure level in telecommunication standards. There's a role that the ITU has, very importantly, a unique role in spectrum allocation. All of these pieces come together at sort of an infrastructure layer for the place where the ITU can and has made a difference within its existing mandate. And so what you'll see in that information paper from the Internet Society is an outline of how we think that role, why we think that role is important, that we think that the existing mandate of the ITU is sufficient for it to carry out that role, and then a discussion along the lines of how that role might be carried out. The need for collaboration, the need for transparency, the need for inclusiveness. All these things that we know very well are at the heart of the internet ecosystem, we think need to be incorporated into the processes and the activities of the ITU going forward. So that's the sort of the positioning that the Internet Society has put forward in the information paper. I want to thank many of you for the comments that you made and the input that you gave us for that. It's something we've been thinking about and talking about for some months. And I would also say that many of you at the chapter level and the local level are involved either on your national delegations, in your community processes, working with your governments, and that is extremely important for the Internet Society. I just came back from Europe and met with several of our chapter members in Europe as well as other governments, and it was very encouraging to see the level of dialogue that's going on within that community in preparation for the Plenipotentiary Conference. And from discussions with many of you, whether it's in the Americas, in Africa, and Asia Pacific, that discussion is being replicated around the world. And the Internet Society chapters and staff are very much a part of that. We want to do this in a way that's constructive, we do this in a way that's positive, and we have a vision as of at least what we can contribute to a positive outcome at the ITU. We're very happy that we've had some very good discussions with the ITU leadership over the last several months, and the collaborative spirit, I think, is very much in the air and is something that we can look forward to, we hope, in Busan. And I think that's reflected in the ITU's willingness to process our information paper in the last several days. So I think that's all very good news. We also have chapters on national delegations to the Plenipotentiary Conference, as well as industry members, organizational members of ISOC, who will be participating in various ways at the conference. And our goal will really be to coordinate and collaborate with the ISOC membership, both in Busan and those of you who are at home, to get input and to give you a sense of what's happening during the conference. So this is an important event, and it's part of that broader discussion of how different stakeholders work together and how this ecosystem can continue to evolve and can continue to meet the needs of the next billions of users that are coming online. So I think I will pause there, and we'll see if we have, I think we have some questions here. Are we to read these? Is that the idea? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just say that also, if anyone feels that they want to turn on their video, we would love to see your faces. So what we can see on our screen is some names, but to the extent that you have the ability to show us yourself, we would love to see you as well. The more we can have
this is a good group.
Oh,
look at
nice.
this.
Now we see our list. The more we can have a face-to-face conversation, the happier we are. What a wonderful list. We have a wonderful list of people who are here from around the world. So don't hesitate. We've put on, what you have to do is go to your WebEx video. And if you did that and turned on your video, then Sally and I could see you. which would be incredible.
So we have a question here from Glenn who says, our challenge is making internet governance discussed in simple terms. His view is we need an abbreviated document on the basics of internet governance. And then also Kathy stated that the next billion users will come from developing nations. How can we integrate them into the internet society?
So, first and foremost, you're doing a lot of that. Our very chapters are I consider you the heart and soul of the work in the communities to ensure that we are finding ways to connect folks. We know in our regional offices that that is their primary mission, and they're doing actual work to get that done. So we know across Africa, we've seen the IXP work, we've seen in Asia work on the mobile platform. We've seen in Latin America the building of enabling communities in ways that's quite inspiring, actually. I think that this is something that, as I talk about the 2015 plan, you'll see that we think we need to step it up, actually. We need to do more. We need to ensure that the policies are in place around the world to enable the bottom-up development and evolution of the internet everywhere, that we empower communities to act for themselves with the support of folks who actually have capital to help them build, to bring these communities together to find ways to move forward. I think that I know, are dedicated to this, and we know you are as well, and that we need to set some goals. We need to actually set some benchmarks and say, look, we can't do this by ourselves. This is all about partnerships, right? It's about partnerships with those who are seeking to build, seeking to innovate, seeking to invest. That's people-to-people work. That's, as our Jane calls it, the human capacity building that we need to do, that we're dedicated to. So I think that's our goal, and I think it's going to be on all of us to make this happen.
I would also say, to Glenn's other question on how to simplify internet governance, I couldn't agree more, Glenn. I think that's it's something that I even heard just last week in Europe. There are a lot of new policymakers that are coming into the internet debate. We see cyber ambassadors. We see different people in governments that are now taking up internet portfolios and have a very steep learning curve in terms of the organizations involved, the different roles and responsibilities. This is a different kind of governance structure, and they have very hard decisions and very tough jobs to do in very short order. So I want to emphasize, I think that's a really important objective, to figure out how we tell this story, how we explain how the internet works, how we explain the governance structures in a way that isn't so full of jargon, but is rather accessible and understandable by everyone who has to be involved in making it succeed. So I agree with you, Glenn, on that point.
And we're committed to getting those papers out that need to be gotten out, that people are asking for the tools they need to do the work they need to do in their localities. I just want to mention that Karen Rose and Michael Kende just actually got back from Rwanda. A very interesting project there around stimulating local content. Obviously, as you think about how to stimulate deployment, how do you stimulate demand, you want to think about how local creators can create content in their own localities and share it on the internet. And that requires, as we well know, the ability to store that information locally in order to access it locally. It requires the technology that allows this to happen, and of course all the creative issues that are around different types of content, whether it be entertainment, whether it be healthcare. if it has to do with family issues. All of that is the kind of thing we like to see developed, and you're going to see us starting to talk a lot more about that local content issue.
So from ISOC Uganda, Daniel in ISOC Uganda wonders what the future of the MAG is, since the internet is endangered of being captured by governments and putting governments in control of what users access. First of all, I think it's an important question in terms of how governments interact with the internet and what the role of governments is going forward. Obviously, governments are part of the internet ecosystem, right? They have certain roles and responsibilities with respect to their citizens, protecting freedoms, protecting rights online. But I think, but there's a danger, of course, that governments will overreach, and we've seen examples of that around the world. And what we need to do, I think, in ISOC is demonstrate the benefits of a true multi-stakeholder model and policy development that's based on sort of robust engagement with a lot of stakeholders with expertise and drawing on the community. But I think to Daniel's point, we do have to be very mindful of the threats, right? I mean, this is not, there are serious areas around the world and in a host of countries where governments are going beyond and in some case trampling the rights of internet users. So we need to pay very careful attention to that. In terms of the role of the MAG, this is part of the ongoing evolution of the Internet Governance Forum. The role of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Committee in shaping the Internet Governance Forum, taking input, and really creating a sustainable environment for the multi-stakeholder dialogue, not just at the IGF meetings themselves, but also throughout the year, so that the community really becomes a community of dialogue that's meaningful and can demonstrate that it can help address some of the hard problems. So Olivier has a voice question coming in. Olivier from the UK England chapter. Hi, Olivier.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. It's Olivier Crépin-Leblanc speaking from ISOC UK England. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Very well, thank you.
Excellent, thanks. I've just turned my video on as well. So you find out.
That's nice.
Hey! Just a question regarding the amount of documentation available this year. Back in Dubai in 2012, ISOC had produced a very large number of very interesting and certainly very topical information about the various points which actually came up during the week. And one of the things that I found very helpful whilst discussing matters in corridors, etc., was to be able to go over to the ISOC desk and pick up those papers and bring those papers to people, not only in English but also in their local language. I think it was that there was some of it translated in French, some of it was in Spanish, if I can remember correctly, and in other languages. So what I was wondering about is how much information do you now have, and how much documentation are you going to bring in Busan for this to be able to happen, especially in, and I've noted it on the list, especially in English, of course, in French for French-speaking African countries, because those are the countries that might actually tip the balance one way or another, but also in Russian, since most Commonwealth of Independent States members or ex-CIS members who are now getting more and more independent from Russia, whilst Russia is becoming more and more, what should we say, closed up, let's call it this way, closed up. This is where the battle is going to happen, and you need to have documentation in those languages. How much of it do you have? And and how are you planning on disseminating it? Would you have it online or would you have it printed?
Thanks, Olivier. And it's good to get the feedback that was very useful to you. So it's always good to know that having, get the feedback that these are things that you'd be looking for. We do have, of course, the matrix of proposals out now, and that's being updated regularly. There are more and more member state proposals coming in as we speak. Even just this morning, I noticed that there are a few new ones that came in overnight. So we will be continuing to update that. We've heard from a lot of you that that's a useful tool as you go through the conference, and so we'll be doing that. It's been a bit different this time than WICET because many of the proposals are only coming in just now. They've been either circulating at the regional level or not even at all, and coming in just first stop at the global level, and even in just the last few weeks. But we do have a lot of documentation. A lot of it is, I think, still very relevant to what we'll hear at the Plenipotentiary, and we do have much of it in multiple languages. So maybe it's a conversation you and I could have in terms of which ones you found specifically the most helpful, because that's absolutely possible. We brought a lot of stuff to Dubai for the WTDC and found a lot of receptivity from governments to have things in their hands and be able to refer to them. So thanks for that, and happy to do that.
So we have some thoughts from...
So Walid, as the chair of ISOC Yemen and a concerned citizen from the Middle East, I feel that there is a need to establish greater connections between different stakeholders on the national and regional level when it comes to the ITU. How can our voices in the region have a say to persuade the ITU to have this inclusive approach? Can our presence in the MAG of the IGF and other platforms help?
So let me start, and then I'll move to you. First, thank you so much. And again, our friends in Yemen, we think about you a lot, and I'm always delighted when I meet you on the trail when we're out there together. I am delighted and just inspired by the work you are doing with your small group of people, and with your passion for these issues. I wanted to refer to a note that I saw Raul post just this week about, I know your concern with the delay we have in ensuring that we have somebody from staff in the region, and that we moved on this a year ago and that we've been slow. I think he explained pretty well that there's been a lot of changes and that it's clearly on his agenda. So number one, ensuring that we are in the region and that we hear your voices on close to where you are is an important thing. Number two, yes, indeed, your voices need to be heard and can be heard through us with our delegation at the ITU. And we invite you, please, to make sure that we know your concerns and what it is that's urgent for you to be able to have presented. I think with the matrix that Sally is talking about, you're going to have a better understanding of what the various sovereign states around the world and member states are asking for in that conference. And we would invite you and others to get back to us about some of those proposals. We also this year tried very hard to encourage chapter members to be involved in their own country delegations, and also to invite some to join ours when that was the appropriate thing to do, where that was the only way they could actually be there. I'm going to just turn to you perhaps, and let me just say I think that the IGF can be useful if, and we should talk about this, if we could start to develop areas of action, perhaps not of, we don't want a treaty writing organization, but there's nothing that says we don't want an IGF that is full of action and wants to go and do things in the world, and perhaps these are places where we can organize. I'll turn over to you.
Yeah, I think all that is right. I mean, the first line of entry to a major ITU conference is, of course, through the national governments and through the policy outreach work that many of you are doing. I don't want to underestimate how challenging that can be. Not all governments are open to the input. We've seen challenges for people getting on national delegations, so it's not easy, and it's a constant effort that we have to make together. And again, that's why we put out some of the documentation that we do in order to try to help you with the efforts that you're making with your local governments. But I think, you know, it's something we have to do together. I would say, I would notice during the WICET process, there was a lot of dialogue between and among chapter members on their experiences at the local level, the questions that were coming up, the kinds of issues that people were concerned with. And like I said, it's late in the day because the Plenipotentiary Conference tends to run on a bit of a different cycle than the WICET did in terms of the number of proposals and the specificity of those proposals coming in. But we still have a couple weeks, and it's still worth having that dialogue. And we've seen some of it on Connect, and I think we should really continue that. It's a way to strengthen the case that you can make at the local level. Okay, Jolly, hi Jolly, from the New York chapter has a video question. Jolly, are we going to get to see you?
Is my audio working?
Your
Yes,
audio
very
is, but we don't
nicely.
see your video yet.
Okay, I'm switching it on.
Hold on.
And I don't know, I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see
We
me or
can't
not.
see you, no, but go ahead.
Okay, oh, we can't connect your webcam. Okay, so first I want to say that congratulate you on this event and say that I think that ISOC Connect is coming along and showing great promise. And I like the way it shows up in my email. It's neatly laid out. It's easy to comprehend the conversations and everything. So I think, you know, it's coming along good. And then to get to the ITU, first thing, there are some initiatives that they have, which are things like Tech for Girls and the Child Safety Days that I think we could get involved with more with them and back them up and basically work together and forge a good relationship by working on these things where we basically have common interests in pursuing these things. There's a thing that I always suggest at our meetings, and I'll punt it out again, is that I believe that we should have ISOC ambassadors who just travel around to chapters, to governments and everywhere, that are people that are on staff who basically, you know, when they arrive at an event, you can put something on and they can talk to people and describe what's going on. And I think there's a lack of information, and you could have a couple of people full time just trotting around the world explaining, you know, basically policy stuff. I know that it's done with, you know, with tech more and the Deploy 360, but I think you need the same kind of action going on policy. And then it comes to my question, which is, you know, we saw the split at the WICET, and the issues over things like the ETNO proposal for sender pays. How much does that come into Plenipot, or does it not come up so much?
Thanks, Jolly. I feel like I'm a bit of that little roving ambassador. I went to 5 countries in 5 days last week, but I don't think I could sustain that one by myself. So there's a lot of opportunity space there. To your question on the split between countries, I will say that the proposals that have come in thus far, and take a look at the matrix if you want to go through it in more detail, there are proposals coming in about the role of the ITU in the internet space, and there are several resolutions that already exist within the ITU that countries are seeking to revise. And I think there may be some different views from countries on exactly how to revise those resolutions and what that means. We do see some proposals coming in on the economic issues and cost, internet access, international interconnection costs, and things like that. But so far, I don't see the level of kind of split, or the widened split that we saw at the WICET. I think it's going to be a very challenging conference. I think it's going to be, there are some very strong differences of opinion between member states. But I think that countries are going into this conference with an objective of getting to consensus and getting to a positive outcome. But there are still a lot of proposals that we haven't seen. There are things that we hear rumors about. So we need to watch this carefully. But I think thus far, the temperature doesn't feel as high as it did going into the wicket at this stage.
So I think if we take this question, maybe we can round this out a bit.
Sure. So ISOC Kenya, Mwendwa from ISOC Kenya has asked if ISOC has a position that they are supporting at the Plenipot. We have a general set of principles and viewpoints that we put into an information paper that we submitted to the ITU and is now posted on our website. And that document, Olivier, is being translated into French and Spanish as we speak, and we'll work on, I think, Russian and Arabic over the next several days. But that position is essentially that we think the ITU has a role to play in the internet ecosystem, that role is clearly laid out in its existing treaty and its existing mandate. We don't think there needs to be an expansion of the ITU scope, but that we do think the ITU has an important set of functions to contribute to the global internet. And we're looking for the ITU to carry out that role in as inclusive and transparent and collaborative fashion as possible. So that's a general positioning for ISOC, and then through the matrix you'll see some more specific positions.
But I want to go a little further, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
We also point out that we each have our respective roles and responsibilities, and that it is the role and responsibility of the ITU to look after the underlying infrastructure, the telecommunications infrastructure. There are things they do under their mandate that are both important and required. However, when it comes to the kinds of issues that I described earlier with respect to how and where we will build the internet, how and where we will govern ourselves, we will stand firm that this needs to be a multi-stakeholder undertaking. Yeah. And that in so many instances it is non-governmental, that it is in the hands of the users. And it is this area that we are likely to have discussion. And it is this area that we believe we need to be clear about the differences between a multilateral convention and treaty, in which, frankly, the nations of the world decide. And there isn't, under the rules, the kind of multi-stakeholder processes, those processes that would be in line and consistent with the way we think about making decisions for ourselves. That said, we think as we look at the resolutions, which we assume will not be part of a new treaty, but will be a kind of way forward, that there is opportunity there for structuring those kinds of multi-stakeholder conversations. And so we will push that idea as we look through these resolutions, and be very, very careful of any resolution that suggests that these decisions lie solely in the hands of government.
Right. You want to take one more question?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And then we'll
How
move.
will ISOC mobilize its membership not organized in chapters? This is from John Moore at the DC chapter.
I think, again, we are going to ask you to help us with this, with the information that we have online, with the information that you will have in your hands. To the extent we can get our full membership to focus on the importance of this convention, I think that is a very good thing. To the extent that they need a place where their voice is to be heard, again, I'm asking the chapters to help us here, to speak to members, to have them, you're closest to them. That doesn't mean that we will not take their thoughts directly to us, but we need your arms, legs, eyes, ears, and hands out there as well as we move forward through this next phase. I think, one more.
So Dave Bernstein has a voice question. Hi, Dave, from New York chapter, I think.
Not be logged in right. I can see myself. Welcome all. I just want to put a few things on the table and not personally argue about them, but I really believe we've got to make ISOC itself multi-stakeholder and attend to the issues that the membership think crucial. We've been hearing talks about making the ITU multi-stakeholder, and the most significant action that could be taken is opening up ISOC's own delegation to our chapter members. The U.S. is sending 100 people. There's no reason we can't do the same, as opposed to having some Swiss diplomat or U.S. diplomat on staff presenting what ISOC believes in. Second thought, the most important issue to most of us is net neutrality. The United States at the ITU has strongly opposed net neutrality, in fact insisted on it being taken out. I think ISOC should support it, and I think that's important. Third, ISOC has an enormous subsidy from the .org registrations. It's more than enough to run a vibrant organization. I've been seeing painful begging of companies like AT&T in order to get additional funding for ISOC and our IGF efforts. I know that comes with strings. I've watched it. I've heard people inside ISOC say, I can't do that because I need a phone company to sponsor my next event. We can't. You're right, but we can't do it. How can we change ISOC to live within the budget we have without begging giant companies and taking the strings that are attached? And I'm going to shut up and let other people speak to these subjects.
Would you like me to do this?
Sure.
So hi, Dave. It's good to see you. I can actually see you on the screen, so thank you. Let me back up and talk about a couple things. First, I am in total agreement with you that ISOC should be a true multi-stakeholder organization. In many ways it is. We can do much, much better, and we will. In a minute, I'm going to talk about what our plan is for 2015. And I think that we're making great strides. I think we are understanding ourselves so much more deeply, the need we have to make sure our society, and we are a society, is inclusive of all its members. So I'll talk about that some more. There has been a push in the last number of weeks on funding the IGF through this association. And obviously we would like to see that the IGF be sustainable, not only at the global level, but across the world. And I think it's entirely appropriate for us to have incented this association to form and to see whether it can raise funds to be sustainable. I don't think those funds should come solely from commercial organizations. Indeed, I think there's a great push to take small kinds of donations so that everyone can support that movement. With respect to ISOC itself, I think we are funded quite well. I tell folks this all the time, and we need to live within that funding, and we need to live amongst and between our members, our chapters, and all of the people who belong to the society. So I am personally committed to that, and I think you're going to see over the next year our doing more and more about that. So I suppose we could have a much longer dialogue about this, and I welcome that at any point. I think it might be useful to, let me stop. If I haven't fully responded to your concerns, I think we will continue that dialogue, but I did want to move on then and talk about what the plan is for 2015. If that's okay with you, Dave, I'm just going to ask if anybody else has any further questions before I give a fuller answer about where we're going in the next year. Let me stop for a minute.
So Anupam from our Bangalore chapter is asking, how is ITU viewing the IANA transition? is the timeline set enough? Your thoughts? I would say I have not seen, at least as far as the Plenipotentiary Conference goes, any proposals so far with respect to IANA. So I think there may be, I'm sure that people will be thinking about that set of issues, but so far that has not emerged onto the ITU agenda. So stepping away from ITU, with respect to the IANA transition in general, it is a very kind of a fast-paced process that's going to happen over the next several months to put the pieces in place to build the kind of proposal that's necessary to go forward to NTIA that meets their requirements, that has broad acceptance among the internet community, and that ensures the ongoing security and stability of these functions. So there's quite a lot of work to be done, but I think we're cautiously optimistic that the community is working very hard towards that, and I think really hopeful that we can meet that timeline. I think it's quite important that we do so. But I don't say that to underestimate the complexity of it. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of challenges in there. There's quite a bit of discussion, I think, that's happened on the chapters list. We keep trying to get information out to you on the various pieces of this, and hope that's useful. And of course, if there's ever questions that you have about the process, because there are so many moving parts, we're always happy to take those up. So Johnny Wilson, Johnny, I don't know which chapter or if you're an individual member, but wants to know, how does ISOC recommend we vote in the upcoming election if we want our voice for freedom of the internet to be heard?
So it's hard to know which election you mean, but I know that we will defer to you to decide how you vote in any election.
That's right.
Because I don't think we're in the business of telling you how to vote. I think we are, we're happy to tell you how we think about the principles on which we as the Internet Society want to move forward. So I'm going to leave that one. And I'm always for letting people decide for themselves how they want to vote.
Should we take this last question?
Last question, and then I thought it would be worthwhile to sort of address some of the internal ISOC issues. I thought, since we're here together and those issues come up regularly, and I think I have some news for you, I think, why don't we take this last question and then we'll move to that.
So we have Scott Mansfield. Hi, Scott, who's an organizational member, or works for an organizational member, and is also the chair of our advisory committee. And he asks, how can ISOC help the iStar community look at problems from the top down? The IETF delves into the details, but governments look at broad concepts like cloud and SDN. How can ISOC help mediate this? I think, Scott, of course, you've hit on a challenge that we've talked about many times, and I think this actually is a good role for the Internet Society to translate between some really core technical principles and understanding of how things work that we find within our technical community, within the IETF and our other partners in the iStar community, and among many of you who are experts in your own right. And the sort of, as you said, higher level policy challenges. And it's really, I think, more important than ever that we translate those things, that we are able to translate things that are highly technical into broad concepts that are understandable, that governments can use as they make their decisions. The way we do that, of course, is that governments have to be open to that kind of input, and increasingly we see more and more of that. The work that Scott and others have been a part of bringing policymakers to the IETF, the work that we do, frankly, within the IGF, which is an effort to build those bridges between technical and policy. And this is all the work that we need to do together so that the policy decisions of the future can be grounded on solid technical information. And maybe this brings us a little bit full circle to Glenn's original question, which was we've got to break down these terms like internet governance or more specific questions about aspects of how the internet works into concepts that all of us can understand and explain, in Olivier's point, in multiple languages. It's a big challenge, but maybe that tees up for 2015.
Yeah, so let me shift for a moment to our thinking about 2015, which I want to share with you because we are in the midst of, frankly, shaping our priorities for 2015. I note from our moderator that there are lots of questions still out there, so I will make this succinct so that if we would prefer to spend our time in dialogue with you, we could get back to those. But let me give you a quick overview. In the last year, we've rearranged ourselves a little bit so that we have our global operations have come to the executive table, as I say, of the folks who are in the leadership. That at the table is Raul, who is heading those regional efforts. Olaf, who has taken on from Leslie the technical aspects of what we do, all of that education and all that thinking around the technical world. Sally, who now has leadership on the policy development aspects. Aisha, who you all know pretty well, who I've asked and who is doing a wonderful job trying to think about our stakeholder activities. Walda, who you know well, who is heading our strategic communications. Todd, who you may not know as well, but who's running this whole effort on trying to use the internet more effectively for communication and collaboration and connection between us. Linda, our person who has been running our human resources, who's taken on a larger role to think about our internal culture. And of course, Greg Kapfer, who, as I say, keeps the place running and ensures that we have a strong financial controls and sustainability. I think I've got everybody who are really working as a team to make sure that we are focusing our activities on those things that can be impactful in the world. We do have a good budget, but it is, of course, a budget that is stretched around the globe. We have regional offices in 5 places at this point. We have our main offices here and in Geneva, but we have presence in many, many places. And there are some things I think we need to strengthen in order to do a better job on the policy, technical, and development goals that we have. Let me start with those first and then talk about the way we think we have to strengthen the organization itself. As you saw from last year's prioritization of our goals, we think about this as ensuring that we have the enabling environment, the enabling policy environment, in order to ensure an open, resilient, secure internet everywhere. So the initiatives we will take over the next years will go to strengthening that objective. We're not going to have a year where we have a number of governmental issues next year, but this year was quite extraordinary, one after another. And we're going to have a little room here to breathe, I think, to help governments and our own users and all of you to come together in a multi-stakeholder way to think about how to think about governance. We've sometimes there's been a lot of ping-ponging this year because there's been a lot of events at which we have to speak. We hope we can get, I think through Sally's leadership, a principled sort of one voice kind of way of talking about this, getting those papers out, getting these conversations with you, hearing about what's going on in the world. So that's one thing. On the technical side, I think there are a couple of things that are of grave importance. The security issue, the data security, the use of users' information, and again, we come at this from the technical side. All of those issues are pressing and we believe have to come to the top of the list. There is an open standards issue that we believe is important for us to keep raising with respect to how the internet is going to develop on new platforms, on the mobile platform, across the world, on new networks that are yet to be built. And we want to make sure that that issue of open standards does not get lost in a lot of the conversations. And we must always say IPv6 because we are indeed near exhaust or at exhaust in two of the areas, and we really have to think about the future of the internet and that we have the numbers we need to go forward. In both of these, crossing these is to finish the whole IANA conversation and to see if we can't get the transition of the U.S. government away and out of that function accomplished. The other area, of course, of big concern for us, as I always speak, is the development issues across our regions, and we will again concentrate on some impactful projects there. Again, I'll take input and thoughts about these ideas as we go forward, but that's the big high-level approach that we see ourselves taking in 2015. A big imperative for us is to tell our story better, and what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is to ensure that ISOC really is seen and recognized as the rational, reasonable voice of where the internet needs to go. In order to do that, we have to be better understood as an organization. We have to be more present in those areas where people who influence the debate can hear us, can understand us, and can trust us. So you're going to see us do a major push around this. We believe our website needs an overhaul. We believe that some of our messaging needs to be clearer. We believe we need to be global in our messaging and to be more sensitive and more influential in all of our markets. And so we're going to push on that. To the notion of how do we build ourselves as ISOC, and here I'll go back to Dave's question. There is a huge number of us who are part of the ISOC community, are part of the extended organizations that are all us, including our chapters, including our members, including our organizational members, our individual members, but also the IETF itself, which is part of us. Also, the inductees to the Internet Hall of Fame, who are voices that can be tapped, and we want them, and we want to hear them. We want to understand how they support the very principles for which we follow them and we revere them. And I could go on. The ambassadors, the interns that have come through ISOC, all of the board members who have served now and in the past. This is an army of people who have a common goal, a common mission, and we think we need to do a better job at connecting all of us so that we can work together for the principles that we hold so dear. And then finally, using this internet more so that we can communicate, collaborate, connect back and forth, to develop the resources so we can reach each other all over the world in a global networks of people. We can't just be on a plane all the time, going to each other exhaustingly from place to place. We have to find a way to communicate and form community here on the internet. Those are our big goals for next year. We're excited about trying to put our resources together, using the resources, the precious resources we have, both the financial resources, the people resources, and all of you to better have us all going in the same direction for what we believe in. So that's the overview for next year. I'll take any thoughts or comments on questions on that, or we we can return to the substantive agenda where I know there's still some more questions. I'll take a little break here.
Maybe on that point, though, on the agenda, Daniel from the Uganda chapter notes that it's important to build the capacity despite the fact that there is the need for more infrastructure development looking at the African region. So I think capacity, human capacity, as well as the technical capacity critical from Uganda's perspective.
Sally, do you have anything you want to add more about the internal issues? And then we can see again the list of questions. This is good. One more time we see the folks who are here with us. And
Oh yeah, we get to see everyone again.
And we get to see everyone again. And this is very encouraging that you're still with us. Thank you very much.
I think just from where I sit on the policy side, as you said, we've had a very busy year in terms of big global events, and we'll still have an ongoing global dialogue, particularly through the WSIS and through the ongoing discussions around the IGF. But I think it's also important to consider and look carefully from the Internet Society's perspective about the policy frameworks that create the environment for the Internet. So looking at some of the difficult policy issues, Kathy mentioned a few around data and privacy and security, and what's the policy environment that needs to be in place to get those things right, that strengthens the user community and strengthens the role of the Internet user. So I think, as we have these global policy discussions, I always like to say, as countries bring issues to the global level, they come from somewhere. They come from a local context and a local environment. And that environment isn't the same everywhere. And so we need to think about the policy principles that need to be in place, and then work with all of you and the chapters to figure out how to contextualize those in a way that's meaningful at the local level.
So I'm told there are a number of questions. So how about we do this? Why don't we do a quick round here and see if we can do quick answers, and we'll talk less, so that we can get your questions in. From Evan, thank you, Evan, good to see you. What's the future of OneNet? Once it was the great collaboration of ISOC, ICANN, and the RIRs. Now nobody seems to be talking about it. What happened? Here's what I think I know. The last conversation I had with actually Paul Wilson was that, we frankly all agree that it's an asset that it would be very good to put it to use. And I think there was actually some good conversations on that happened around the whole WEF issue. I believe there's still a lot of conversation about how to use this more effectively. I certainly want to see that happen, and I expect to take that up again. Right now, I feel like Paul is the steward, and it would be useful to talk with him about this as well.
So Nurani from Sweden has a video question.
Give it a go. Can you see me? Oh, look at that.
Let's see.
Can you hear me and see me?
We can't.
We can sort of hear you, and there you are.
There you are. Hi.
Just a few quick comments and a question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate these background documents that you put out. They're extremely useful, not only when I talk to my local internet community or when I talk to my organization, but also when I talk to my government. So I'm going to Busan as part of the Swedish delegation, and I can show them these are the issues on the table, and it also helps us guide our work. So I think great work there, and keep that coming. And I think keeping that updated and timely is essential. Then I just had a question about, or question or comment about the work actually during Plenipot. And I think it would be great if ISOC could also help not only with the communication between the stakeholders with common views at the conference, but also in communicating with the rest of the world. I think some governments are maybe limited in what they can say and what they can say on Twitter or in their external communications during these weeks. But if they can point to good publications or good comments or good Twitter comments or reports, that facilitates that work. And I think that's extremely important as well in terms of opening up these discussions and bringing sort of demystifying some of it and bringing some of that information out to the outside world.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that'll be a key part of what we do is sort of ongoing communications throughout the conference. So thanks for that. I don't know who's next. I don't see anybody on our queue, but I see up there that there's a queue. So I thought I saw something that Alejandro might be next. So can I call on Alejandro?
Are you there?
I lost you, but I can hear you and see you now, I think.
Audio is back. Okay, so we were off for just a few minutes or seconds. Okay. I think maybe Alejandro is next. Can we call on Alejandro?
Hi, Alejandro Pisanti here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
hi, Alex.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Going back to the ITU and chapter.
You are coming in and out, Alejandro. The audio's not so good.
Let me start again. Can you hear me better?
That's better, yes.
Yes, much better.
I'll speak slower so that it breaks down less. We have been having interactions with many parties in the government here and the delegation that will attend the Plenipot. In a discussion yesterday, we have analyzed that one of the possible contentious issues will be summarized in the collision between multilateral mechanisms and multi-stakeholder, where we, of course, are not speaking anymore of multi-stakeholderism like it were a kind of faith, but actual pragmatics of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And what we see that could be a broader lens to break down some of these discussions and push them into the future without total lockdown is to start speaking about an architecture of forms of governance where multi-stakeholder for us will be the general stance, but multilateral will still have to be necessary. The internet community has already been recognizing that, for example, for law enforcement related issues, we do need the multilateral organizations. This also has a practical implication for the negotiations in the Plenipot, that it underlines where the ITU actually should not step in, like children online security or issues like that, where, as Judith Hellerstein has correctly pointed out recently, they actually take the oxygen and the light away from other UN or multilateral agencies that are actually more effective. I hope this is useful for our analysis with other delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. I've actually found it very useful. I've actually learned a lot from the conversation that you all have been having on Connect. We can talk about that in a minute. After the announcement of this forum. So I think all of this, this conversation is important as we develop our own thinking about how to make the multi-stakeholder principle work in a complex world in which obviously governments have a significant role, and on the global level, governments need to cooperate with each other on issues that affect the internet as well. So we do have to develop in our own minds, in our own principled way, the architecture of decision-making given where we are on the internet today. And I think this is what I probably said, perhaps too clumsily, that we want to turn our attention to next year. We get through Busan, we hope, in a positive way, and then see if we can't really think through and talk through this very architectural question.
So Judith Hellerstein from Washington, D.C. has a question about IXPs. Judith?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So
And we can
my-
see you.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, so my question is that I was concerned about the movement among various governments to try to create a resolution instructing the ITU to develop guidelines for IXPs. And I feel that's counterproductive in that a one-size-fits-all standard is not going to address any of the variations and curtail innovation. And I just was wondering what ISOC thought about that, and if you are also opposed to that, what are you doing to help prevent that from happening?
Right. Thanks, Judith. Judith is referring to a proposal that has come forward from the Americas region, and I think was specifically authored by Argentina. And it's a proposal about internet exchange points and the role of the ITU in promoting internet exchange points. One of the things that the draft resolution calls on is for the ITU to develop guidelines. There was at one point a proposal that the ITU develop recommendations, which we were even more uncomfortable with. And I think, and I'll see, Jane Coffin is on the line as well. She might be able to jump in here if she's willing. Sorry, Jane. But I think in general, there's probably room for a conversation, particularly. I think the development sector has obviously quite a lot to offer in this area, and in fact there's already been some outreach between the ITU and the Internet Society on how we can work together in terms of sharing of best practices. So I think from my perspective that would be a more constructive way for that resolution to go than issuing strong guidelines, rules, recommendations, something much more inflexible. Jane, I don't know, do you have anything you want to add to that? Or maybe we can take that with Judith offline as well. But it's an important issue that will come up at the Plenipot for sure.
Hi, Sally. Just very briefly, and Judith, thank you for that question. It's an important one, and we are definitely on it and trying to work with colleagues to come up with a strategy at the Plenipot. We'd be happy to share that with you. As Sally has said, it's important for us to work collaboratively with the ITU. I should note that we just held the first ever ITU, ISOC, and some of the European IXP and RIPE NCC workshop last week in Montenegro to talk about them developing an IXP. So we're working very hard to come up with a collaborative way and to also come up with a reasonable way forward at the plenipotentiary. As Sally is saying, this is something we could take offline with you in greater depth, but we share your concerns, and we're looking for the most open, accessible, and flexible way to address best practices and work with the community of interest.
So I think I'm understanding that there are more questions, and that I'm concerned that we are scheduled to for about 12 more minutes. So perhaps what we might do is take those questions offline and make sure we get back to anyone who is queued up. If there is any last thing people behind the screen think that I should or Sally should address that feels urgent, perhaps you could let us know now. We're looking at a neat little screen here that tells us what the queue looks like. And barring that, I think it might be good if we wrapped up this conversation and thought about the future. So Sally, I'm going to start. Oh, let's see, one last thing. This is the net neutrality question. Here's the issue that I think arises in our minds. We actually are not clear that in this treaty convention that the introduction of internet issues is the right way to think about this. So Dave, I'm happy to have this conversation with you, but I think it's a longer one about what the scope of the convention is and whether and how we want to introduce new issues. This is not to say this is not an important issue. This is more about the scope of the convention that I worry about. Does that feel
Yeah, I think that's right. And Dave, I think our views more generally on the issues of net neutrality, remain as they have been, a support for some basic principles on, the ability to access content of our choosing, competition in the marketplace, transparency in the relationship between the operator and the end user, and traffic management that's done in a way that's not discriminatory or anti-competitive. So these are the core views that ISOC has put forward with respect to net neutrality for quite a long time, and those remain unchanged. I think the question for the plenipotentiary is whether this is within the scope of the ITU's work, and there I think we would not be comfortable with that.
So I'm going to take that for the moment as the last question that we'll address. I would hope that you would keep the conversation going on Connect. So let me start with Connect. So I've seen a lot of conversations on Connect. Let me tell you just sort of how I come at it and how we're trying to make the adaptations. It seems to me there are any number of mediums in which we can communicate. Connect has been, I think, an interesting experiment by our very smart innovators for internet connectivity about ways we can do that, and to introduce this idea of a discussion forum, which is very different than a email list. It is hopefully allows more multiple conversations, and it allows some flexibility in how those are done. That said, I understand that there are well understood conventions about how we use the technology with respect to email and how email can be useful as well. I think folks are working very hard to see if they can make these two things work together, frankly, for your comfort and because this is the way you want it to work and this is your forum. So we will try to make the adjustments. I'm pleased with some level of patience on your part as folks work through the technology. I saw a note from Fernando this morning that I thought was fabulous. I hope you met this team. They're terrific. And they're working very hard to find ways that we can have more closer proximity to each other on the internet. This is one way we think we might do this. It's not to the exclusion of others. So I think he gave a place where we could continue that conversation, and I hope we would do that. Meanwhile, with respect to these issues, I think we could continue the conversation we've had on internet governance, on the Plenipot, on what's next, on Connect as well. So full stop there. And I'm just pleased that we're starting to experiment with different ways of connecting. This is another one of those ways, and I'd like to get your feedback around the usefulness of this kind of forum. We have done a lot of talking with you, with each other, about how to ensure that, indeed, our chapters and members are part of our ongoing conversation, deliberations, and decision-making. I would prefer that we have these kind of face-to-face opportunities, that we use video, that we get better at this, so that we can confer with each other in a way that's meaningful, that we actually have a dialogue and we work through issues and not just present issues and have a question and answer a question. To so many of these things, there's not one answer. There's a development of ideas that we have to do. So you're going to see us trying to experiment more with this. Again, we take your comments, your thoughts, your suggestions, your notions of innovation on how to do that better. If, in fact, we think this is useful, I said to the team, we need to commit to this at least once a quarter. It doesn't only have to be me. It doesn't always have to be Sally. It can be any of us on staff that are relevant to a discussion that we need to have. So please get us information on how you would like to use this. And our commitment to you is that we're going to keep trying new ways to have that happen. Third, we need to be present to you where you live, and you will see us over the next year amongst the senior leadership, but also always amongst our staff and among all of our staff and our regional folks to be present where you are. I have found it over the last year quite challenging and a bit exhausting to be everywhere where you are because it is a very large globe. Nevertheless, we will multiply our efforts to be to find places and to ensure that those are impactful visits with you when we make them. When we're in the region, I have asked folks to be sure that we reach out to our chapters and our members so that we can, when we are there, have that conversation. And I think we are really benefited by that, and so we have a commitment to do that as well. On the big issues around the internet, seems to me this is a crucial time. It's a crucial time that we are paying attention, that we get others to pay attention. There is, as we know, enormous opportunity with this network of networks to bring enormous economic, social, cultural benefits to individuals, to communities of communities. It is also under attack right now. There are those who do not want the kind of connectivity that this provides. They do not want the kind of communication that is allowed between communities. We are and will remain steadfastly dedicated to making sure that the internet is everywhere for everyone in an open platform in a way that they need not be afraid to use it with technologies that are accessible and available to them and affordable to where they live. That's a big mission. We cannot do it alone. We cannot think, even amongst ourselves as the Internet Society, that we alone can make this happen. It is all about partnerships. It's all about collaboration. It's all about ensuring that users themselves are empowered to take action for themselves online in the communities in which they live, that they're smart about how they themselves use the technologies, that we talk to the commercial interests who, yes, indeed, have the scale and the ability to invest, but yes, indeed, have their own commercial agendas, and that we keep moving together again and again with all of the interests, our governments, our companies, our people, our organizations, the not-for-profit organizations, the NGOs, the human rights advocates around the world, and we come together to ensure that this technology, that this thing called the internet, this idea, this reality, and this promise of the internet is one that we will see through and that we will see continue into the future. Sally, I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll sign off.
Well, there's not much to say in addition, but just to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy days to join this, to be interactive. I do hope the conversation continues and connect, and as well as the personal feedback that we always get and really do appreciate. The insights that you offer help strengthen the kinds of outputs we can produce and the insights we can provide to governments and the global community. And so please do keep that feedback coming in and the input. So thank you very much, and I'll see some of you in Busan and hopefully many of you shortly thereafter.
Yes, and thank you from me as well. Thank you for the enormous support that you give us as staff, that you've given me personally, and I'll see you on the trail. Thanks.